The clock on the grand wall ticked past 3 in the morning when the sound of keys scraped against the front door of the Reed penthouse. Rain hammered the glass windows, streaking down in silver lines that caught the city lights below. Jacqueline Reed sat alone on the velvet couch, one hand cupping her swollen belly, the other gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. She had waited hours in silence, the television long gone dark, the room filled only with the storm outside and the heavy rhythm of her heart. Her husband Damien finally stumbled through the door. His expensive tailored suit was wrinkled, his tie half undone. The scent hit her first. Whiskey mixed with perfume, a powdery sweetness she didn't own. Behind him trailed the faint giggle of the night, clinging to him like a ghost. He looked like a man who had been living someone else's life, while she was left to carry his child alone. "Where have you been?" Jacqueline's voice cracked, softer than she wanted it to be. Her eyes searched his face, begging for a trace of the man she once knew, the man she had married 5 years earlier when hope and love still lived between them. Damien's lips curled into a smirk. He tossed his jacket carelessly onto the marble floor and loosened his collar. "Don't start with me, Jacqueline. You wouldn't understand. Business." His tone dripped with sarcasm. "Business doesn't smell like cheap perfume," she shot back, her hand trembling as she pushed herself to her feet. 6 months pregnant, her body ached with every movement, yet the fire in her voice held steady. "I'm your wife. I deserve the truth." His eyes, glazed and cruel, snapped toward her. "Truth?" He laughed bitterly. "The truth is you're a burden. All you do is sit here, waiting, nagging. You think carrying that child makes you special? Do you know how many women would kill to be in your place?" Her chest tightened. For months she had swallowed the rumors, the late-night calls, the unexplained absences. She told herself he was stressed, that men in business sometimes strayed but always came home. But now the lies unraveled at his lips, the last fragile thread snapping. "Damien, please." Her voice softened, desperate. "Don't do this. Don't throw away everything we built. I loved you." That word was the spark. His hand shot up, faster than her eyes could follow, and the sound of the slap cracked through the penthouse like thunder. Her head whipped to the side, hair falling across her face. The taste of iron filled her mouth. Her body stumbled backward, colliding with the edge of the couch as her hands instinctively cradled her stomach. Tears welled instantly, but not from the sting. It was the shock, the betrayal so deep it felt like her soul itself had been struck. She pressed her palm against her cheek, staring at the man before her, a stranger in the skin of her husband. Damien's chest heaved, his expression twisted in a haze of alcohol and arrogance. "Don't look at me like that," he growled. "You pushed me. You made me do it." Jacqueline's legs shook beneath her. Every instinct screamed at her to stay silent, to keep the peace, but something inside her snapped. The child inside her kicked, as if echoing her resolve. She reached for the phone she had never let go of, fingers trembling, and dialed 3 simple numbers. 911, what's your emergency? Her breath hitched. My husband, he hit me. I'm 6 months pregnant. Please send someone now." Her voice broke, but the words came out with surprising clarity. On the other end, the dispatcher's tone sharpened. "Ma'am, stay on the line. Officers are being dispatched to your location. Are you safe right now?" Damien froze. For the first time that night, his smirk faltered. "What are you doing?" he demanded, stepping closer. His eyes darted to the phone, to her tear-streaked face, to the protective way she clutched her belly. Jacqueline backed away, shaking her head. "I won't let you hurt me or our baby again." The silence stretched, broken only by the storm outside and the faint, distant wail of sirens. Damien's jaw clenched, his fists tightening at his sides. For a heartbeat, she feared he might strike again. But then the reality seemed to sink into him. The sirens growing louder, the dispatcher still on the line, her voice instructing Jacqueline to remain calm, to wait for help. Damien's face drained of color. "Jacqueline, hang up," he ordered, his voice now tinged with panic. "You don't want to do this. Think about what this will do to me, to us." She steadied herself, breathing through the ache in her cheek, through the fear clawing at her chest. "You already destroyed us, Damien. Tonight is the night it ends." The pounding on the door grew louder, fists slamming against the polished wood. "NYPD, open up." Jacqueline's heart pounded as she took one last look at her husband, the man she once thought would protect her forever. Then she moved toward the door, each step heavy but certain. She opened it to find two uniformed officers standing in the hall, their presence a shield against the chaos behind her. Relief flooded her veins as they stepped inside, their eyes instantly assessing the scene. The trembling wife, the swollen belly, the red mark blooming across her cheek, and the man in the rumpled suit standing frozen in guilt. "Ma'am, are you the one who called?" one officer asked gently. Jacqueline nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, please, take him away." For a moment, Damien tried to protest, words tumbling from his mouth, excuses, denials, half-truths. But the officers weren't listening. They moved swiftly, instructing him to place his hands behind his back. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut was the sweetest sound Jacqueline had ever heard. As he was led toward the door, Damien turned his head, his eyes burning into hers with a mixture of rage and fear. "You'll regret this," he hissed. Jacqueline stood tall, one hand resting firmly on her belly. For the first time in months, her voice carried strength. "No, Damien, you will." The officers pulled him out into the hall, his voice fading beneath the thunder of the storm. Jacqueline closed the door slowly, her body trembling as the adrenaline drained. She pressed her back against the door, sliding down until she sat on the floor, tears spilling freely. But amidst the pain and the fear, a spark of something new ignited within her, a determination stronger than the man who had tried to break her. For the first time, she saw a future beyond him. And as the storm raged outside, Jacqueline whispered to herself and to the tiny life inside her, "We're going to be okay." Because what happened next would shake the entire city to its core. Jacqueline Reed was born in a small town upstate, far from the glittering towers of New York. Her earliest memories were filled with the scent of warm bread from her mother's kitchen and the sound of her father's laughter echoing through their modest farmhouse. She grew up in a world where neighbors waved from porches, where Sunday church bells rang across quiet streets, and where life seemed simple, almost unshakable. Her parents weren't wealthy, but they were rich in something money could never buy: love. Her mother, Elaine, worked as a nurse, tending to the sick with a patience and kindness Jacqueline would one day inherit. Her father, Paul, was a mechanic who could fix anything with his hands, but always reminded his daughter that the most important thing to fix was someone's heart. From them, Jacqueline learned the values of compassion, honesty, and resilience. As a child, she dreamed not of riches, but of purpose. She wanted to teach, to shape young minds the way her favorite elementary school teacher once shaped hers. A good teacher doesn't just give knowledge, that teacher had told her. She gives hope. Those words lodged deep inside Jacqueline's soul. By the time she graduated high school with honors, she had earned a scholarship to study education in the city. The transition from small-town innocence to the relentless pace of New York was overwhelming. The skyscrapers seemed to swallow the sky, and the noise never stopped. But Jacqueline carried her small-town values with her like a shield. She studied hard, worked nights at a diner to cover expenses, and lived in a tiny studio apartment that shook whenever the subway passed. It wasn't easy, but every hardship only deepened her resolve. It was during those years that she met Damien Reed. He was charming, confident, and ambitious, the kind of man who seemed larger than life in her eyes. He wore tailored suits, even as a junior executive, and when he smiled, the world around him seemed to pause. Jacqueline never imagined a man like him would notice a woman like her, but he did. Their romance was a whirlwind. Damien swept her off her feet with candlelit dinners, roses left at her door, and promises whispered under the city lights. To Jacqueline, he wasn't just a lover. He was a protector, a partner, the man who made her believe fairy tales might exist in the real world. Within a year, they were married in a modest ceremony attended by her family and a few of his business associates. She wore a second-hand dress, but in his eyes, she felt like royalty. At first, married life was everything she had dreamed of. Damien worked long hours, but he came home to her with stories of deals and opportunities, and she listened with pride. She believed in him, believed that his ambition was for them, for their future family. She continued teaching elementary school, pouring her heart into her students, often staying late to help those who struggled. Her life wasn't glamorous, but it was full, meaningful. Then came the moment she had prayed for. She learned she was pregnant. She had always wanted to be a mother, to pass on the love she had been given as a child. When she told Damien, his eyes lit up, and for a fleeting moment she thought they were closer than ever. He promised to be a good father, promised that their child would never want for anything. But promises are easy to make and easier to break. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the cracks began to form. Damien's late nights grew later. His phone calls became more secretive. He began traveling without explanation, his excuses vague. When Jacqueline confronted him, he dismissed her concerns, accusing her of paranoia. "I'm building a future for us," he would snap. "Why can't you just be supportive?" She tried. God, she tried. She told herself the stress of pregnancy was making her sensitive, that her husband was just under pressure at work. She overlooked the unfamiliar perfume on his collars, the lipstick stains too faint to be accidental. She chose silence when he began criticizing her clothes, her hair, even the way she spoke. Each word chipped away at her confidence, until the vibrant young woman who once dreamed of changing the world began to disappear. At school, she still smiled for her students, still knelt beside their desks to encourage them, but inside she was crumbling. She carried not only the weight of her unborn child, but also the suffocating weight of a marriage that felt more like a prison every day. Her friends noticed her fading light, but whenever they asked, she gave the same answer: "I'm fine." The truth was, she wasn't fine. Nights alone in the penthouse stretched endlessly. She would sit by the window, watching the city glow, while tears streamed silently down her face. She remembered her father's words, that the most important thing to fix was someone's heart. But how could she fix a heart that had turned against her? The night Damien didn't come home at all, she lay awake, clutching the baby blanket she had knitted with trembling hands. Every kick from the tiny life inside her was a reminder that she had to stay strong, that she couldn't let despair win. Still, doubt gnawed at her. Had she made a mistake? Had she trusted the wrong man with her life and her child's future? Her loneliness grew heavier with every passing day. She thought of calling her parents, of running back to the safety of her childhood home. But pride stopped her. She didn't want them to see her broken. Didn't want them to know the fairy tale she had promised them was shattering. She wanted to be strong, to endure, to believe that maybe somehow love could still heal what was breaking. But deep down, Jacqueline knew the truth. She wasn't just enduring for herself anymore. Every decision, every tear, every silent scream was now for the baby inside her. And with that realization came a shift. If Damien wouldn't protect her, she would protect herself. If he wouldn't fight for their family, she would. The memory of her parents' love, the strength they had shown her, became her anchor. She looked in the mirror at her tired eyes, her rounded belly, and whispered, "You are stronger than this. You are not alone." Still, the ache remained. Still, the nights were long. And still, the questions haunted her. How much more could she take? How long before the man she married showed his true self completely? The answer came faster than she could have imagined, in a way more brutal than she could have ever prepared for. The night his hand finally struck her, shattering not only her heart, but everything she thought she knew about love. The Reed penthouse towered high above Manhattan, a gleaming monument of glass and steel that seemed to touch the storm clouds themselves. To the world outside, it was a palace. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic view of the city that never slept. Times Square glowing like an electric jewel, the Hudson River glistening under moonlight, the Empire State Building standing tall like a guardian of dreams. To anyone else, living here would have been the pinnacle of success, the kind of life people only imagined in magazines or films. But for Jacqueline, the penthouse was not a palace. It was a gilded cage. The marble floors were polished to a shine, yet their coldness seeped into her bare feet each night as she paced alone, waiting for Damien to come home. The chandeliers sparkled with imported crystals, but their glow was sterile, incapable of warming the shadows that lingered in every corner. The sleek leather furniture looked impressive but was stiff and unwelcoming, designed more for appearances than for comfort. It was a space that spoke of power, wealth, and ambition, but not of love. During the day, The penthouse was filled with silence, so sharp Jacqueline could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the oversized clock, even her own breath echoing. At night, when Damien was gone, the silence turned heavier, pressing on her chest like invisible hands. The vastness of the rooms made her feel smaller than she had ever felt before. She often found herself sitting on the edge of their king-sized bed, staring at the empty pillow beside her, wondering if loneliness could actually consume a person whole. The nursery down the hall was the only place that felt alive. She had painted the walls a soft sky blue herself, despite Damien's protests that they could just hire someone. She wanted her touch in every brushstroke, wanted her child to feel her love before they even entered the world. A rocking chair sat near the window, and sometimes late at night, she would sit there humming lullabies, clutching the tiny baby clothes she had folded neatly into drawers. In that room, at least, she could imagine a future brighter than the shadows in the rest of the penthouse. Still, the contrast gnawed at her. How could a home so beautiful feel so broken? How could a life that looked so perfect from the outside feel like it was collapsing on the inside? The answer was simple: Damien. When he was present, the atmosphere changed. He filled the rooms with his booming voice, his phone glued to his ear, his mind always calculating the next deal, the next step up the ladder. He thrived on attention, on power, on the admiration of others. The penthouse wasn't a home to him. It was a stage, a place where he could host investors, wine and dine clients, parade his success. Jacqueline was rarely invited to those dinners. When she was expected to smile, to look beautiful, and to remain silent while Damien boasted. She was an accessory, not a partner. Her thoughts, her dreams, her very existence were brushed aside in service of his ego. But the worst moments weren't when he was there. They were when he wasn't. Jacqueline would watch the clock tick past midnight, past 1, past 2. She would text him, her messages simple at first. "Are you safe? When will you be home?" Then more desperate, "Please, Damien. I can't sleep until I know you're okay." Most of the time those messages went unanswered. Sometimes hours later, she'd receive a curt reply. "Busy. Don't wait up." She told herself she was being paranoid, that business really could keep a man out until dawn. But deep down, she knew. The faint traces of perfume, the lipstick smudge on his collar, the way he avoided her gaze when he walked in at sunrise, it all told the truth she didn't want to face. The penthouse reflected that truth too. Though massive, it smelled faintly of smoke and expensive cologne whenever Damien came home from his so-called meetings. His clothes often reeked of bars and something darker, a reminder of the places he had been. The aura of betrayal lingered like a stain, no matter how many times Jacqueline tried to clean the air with lavender candles. That night, the night everything changed, the storm outside mirrored the chaos inside. Rain battered the windows, lightning lit the sky in blinding flashes, and thunder rolled so loud it rattled the chandeliers. Jacqueline sat curled on the couch, a blanket draped over her shoulders, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Her belly shifted with the baby's movements, each kick a reminder of what was at stake. She had prepared herself for another sleepless night. But at 3 a.m., the sound of keys scraped against the lock. Her heart lurched. He was home. The door swung open, and Damien stumbled in, his suit disheveled, his shirt half untucked. His hair was mussed, his eyes glassy. The stench of alcohol clung to him, and beneath it was that same perfume she had noticed too many times before. Sweet, floral, unmistakably feminine. He didn't look at her right away. He tossed his jacket onto the floor and muttered something under his breath. Jacqueline rose slowly, her legs unsteady, her hand braced against her belly. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice soft but trembling. Damien finally lifted his gaze, and the smirk on his lips made her stomach twist. "Out," he said simply. "You don't need to know more than that." The storm outside thundered again, the windows trembling in their frames. Jacqueline's chest tightened. She thought of all the nights she had sat here alone, of all the times she had begged him for honesty. She thought of the child inside her, of the love she had given so freely, and of the respect she had received in return. None. Something in her snapped. "You smell like her," she whispered, her voice shaking with both fear and rage. "You think I don't notice? You think I'm blind?" Damien's smirk widened. He leaned closer, his words dripping venom. At least she makes me feel alive. You're nothing but a weight around my neck." The words cut deeper than any blade. Jacqueline staggered back, her hand pressed to her chest, as if to hold the shattered pieces of her heart together. Her knees weakened, but she refused to collapse. "I am carrying your child," she said, her voice breaking. "How can you say that?" The thunder roared again, shaking the walls. Damien's face twisted, a mask of arrogance and cruelty. And then, the moment came when his hand lifted, and the storm outside finally broke inside those walls too. Damien Reed had always been a man who lived for appearances. On the surface, he was the embodiment of success. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in sharp suits that looked sculpted to his frame. His dark hair was always slicked back, his watch gleaming with the kind of precision only wealth could buy. To the world, he was Damien Reed, the self-made investor who clawed his way up from nothing to everything, the golden boy who turned opportunity into empire. But behind closed doors, the truth was darker. Damien's hunger for success was never satisfied. Every milestone became meaningless the moment it was achieved, replaced instantly by the next prize, the next deal, the next conquest. His ambition was not the kind that built, it was the kind that consumed. He thrived on control, on bending people to his will, on making them feel small so he could feel big. And when that control slipped, even for a second, his temper flared like a match tossed on gasoline. He had mastered the art of double life. In public, he was charismatic, a man whose laugh could fill a room, whose firm handshake sealed million-dollar deals. He played the role of loving husband when cameras were near, arms slung around Jacqueline at charity galas, his smile flashing like a polished diamond. But as soon as the spotlight dimmed, so did his act. At home, he became someone else, sharp-tongued, dismissive, a man who treated the woman carrying his child as though she were invisible. The truth was, Damien had never been content with Jacqueline. Her simplicity, her quiet strength, her devotion, qualities others admired, felt like shackles to him. He wanted more. More beauty, more excitement, more validation. And in his restless search for more, he found Sabrina Cole. Sabrina was the opposite of Jacqueline in every possible way. At just 25, she was fresh-faced, with long auburn hair that tumbled in perfect waves, and eyes that sparkled with mischief. She was young enough to idolize Damien, and clever enough to flatter him. She worked as his personal assistant, but she had far bigger dreams than typing reports or fetching coffee. Sabrina wanted power. She wanted status, and she saw Damien as her shortcut to both. She learned quickly what he liked: compliments about his brilliance, laughter at his cruel jokes, admiration for his expensive tastes. She dressed in tight dresses that left little to the imagination. Her perfume a sweet floral scent that clung to Damien's suits when he returned home. With her, Damien felt young again. Powerful, desired. She stroked his ego with the skill of a surgeon, cutting away any lingering doubts he might have had about betraying his wife. To Sabrina, Jacqueline was an afterthought, an obstacle. She mocked the older woman behind her back, calling her the school teacher, as though it were a punchline. At office parties, she whispered in Damien's ear, her laughter loud enough for colleagues to hear, staking her claim in subtle, cruel ways. When she was alone with Damien, she pushed harder. "Why are you still with her?" she would ask, her lips brushing his ear. "She's weak. You could do so much better." Damien drank in every word. What he didn't realize, or perhaps didn't care about, was that Sabrina's devotion was as shallow as his own loyalty. She didn't love him. She loved what he represented: wealth, power, the glamorous lifestyle she craved. She paraded their affair on social media with cryptic captions and designer handbags she could never have afforded on her own. Her friends whispered about her mystery man, and she relished the attention. Their nights together were loud, reckless, indulgent. They filled expensive hotel suites with laughter, champagne bottles, and lies. Damien told her what she wanted to hear, that he would leave Jacqueline soon, that Sabrina was his future, that she was the only woman who truly understood him. She believed him, or at least pretended to, and every time he stumbled back into the penthouse smelling of her, Jacqueline's heart cracked a little more. But Sabrina underestimated the woman she mocked. For while Damien and Sabrina lived in their fantasy, Jacqueline endured in silence, growing stronger with each betrayal. She wasn't blind, and she wasn't weak. She was simply waiting, watching, protecting the child inside her until the day came when the truth would explode into the open. Damien, however, couldn't see beyond his arrogance. He believed himself untouchable. He thought money could bury secrets, that his charm could erase suspicion, that Jacqueline would never dare stand against him. To him, she was fragile, dependent, powerless. He had no idea just how wrong he was. The cracks were already showing in his empire. Investors whispered about his late arrivals, his erratic decisions, his reckless spending on parties and luxuries. He brushed it off, blaming the market, blaming stress, blaming anything but himself. He didn't notice that his so-called loyal allies were growing uneasy. He didn't realize that in chasing his mistress, he was also losing his marriage, his reputation, and soon everything else. One night, in the glow of an upscale lounge, Sabrina leaned across the table, her manicured nails tapping against his hand. "When are you going to make it official?" she pressed. "When are you going to stop hiding me?" Damien smirked, swirling his glass of whiskey. "Patience, darling, these things take time. But soon, very soon, you'll have everything. Everything." That word echoed like a promise, one Sabrina clung to and one Damien convinced himself he could deliver. But everything had a cost, and he hadn't yet realized the price would be higher than he could afford. Back in the penthouse, Jacqueline sat in the nursery, running her fingers over the soft baby blanket she had knitted, whispering to her unborn child. "One day, it'll just be you and me," she said softly, "and we'll be safe." Her voice trembled, but her eyes burned with quiet determination. Damien believed he held all the cards. Sabrina believed she was on the verge of victory, but fate and justice were already moving into place. And the night would come when their cruel games would no longer be hidden, when the world itself would witness Damien's betrayal in the most humiliating way possible. The slap had left a red imprint on Jacqueline's cheek, but it was the silence afterward that felt louder than thunder. For a moment, time froze. The storm outside crashed against the windows, lightning slicing across the skyline, but inside the penthouse, the air was suffocating. Damien stood there, chest heaving, his hand still raised, as if stunned by what he had just done. Jacqueline's entire body shook, her hands wrapped instinctively around her swollen belly, shielding the fragile life inside. She had endured insults, late nights, and betrayals, but this was the line she could never allow him to cross again. With trembling fingers, she picked up her phone and dialed 3 digits she had prayed she'd never have to call. 911. "What's your emergency?" The calm voice on the other end felt like a lifeline. My husband," Jacqueline whispered, her voice breaking. "He hit me. I'm 6 months pregnant. Please, send help." The dispatcher's tone sharpened instantly. "Ma'am, stay on the line. Officers are on their way. Can you get somewhere safe?" Jacqueline backed toward the door, her eyes locked on Damien. His smirk faltered, replaced by panic. "What are you doing? Hang up the phone." But she didn't. She clutched it tighter, her voice steadier now. "I'm protecting myself. I won't let you hurt me or our baby again." The dispatcher reassured her, guiding her through each breath until moments later the pounding of fists echoed at the door. "NYPD, open up." The sound made Damien flinch. He cursed under his breath, straightening his shirt as though appearances could erase his crime. Jacqueline opened the door and 2 uniformed officers stepped inside. Their eyes scanned the scene quickly. The red mark on Jacqueline's cheek, the trembling in her voice, the man reeking of alcohol and arrogance. "Ma'am, are you the one who called?" one officer asked gently. Jacqueline nodded, tears brimming. "Yes, he hit me." The words cut through the room like glass. Damien barked a laugh, desperate and cruel. "This is ridiculous. She's exaggerating. Look at her. Hormonal, emotional. I didn't do anything." But his arrogance betrayed him. His words were slurred, his tie was stained with lipstick, and his eyes refused to meet hers. The officers exchanged a look before stepping closer. "Sir, we're going to need you to calm down. We'll take a statement, but first turn around and place your hands behind your back." "What? No, you can't," Damien protested. But the officers moved swiftly. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the penthouse, and for the first time, Damien looked small. The commotion had drawn attention. Curious neighbors peeked from their doors in the hallway, whispering in shock as the scene unfolded. "Is that Damien Reed?" one muttered. "The investor? The guy always on the news?" Another whispered back. "That's his wife, Pregnant, my God. The humiliation spread like wildfire. Phones lit up, recording video snippets as Damien was led out in cuffs, shouting, "This is a mistake. I'll ruin you all for this." But no one listened. The flashing red and blue lights outside painted the luxury tower in scandal. Jacqueline, still trembling, stepped into the hallway as the officers guided her husband away. She felt every pair of eyes on her. The pity, the whispers, the judgment. Yet for once, she didn't shrink. She stood tall, her hand resting protectively on her belly, her voice steady when the officer asked if she wanted medical assistance. "I'll be fine," she said softly, though her cheek burned and her heart ached. "Just, please make sure he can't come near me again." The officers nodded, promising to file an immediate restraining order. They escorted Damien down the elevator, his voice echoing with curses, all the way to the lobby. Within hours, the story spread beyond the building. A neighbor's video hit social media. Wealthy investor arrested after assaulting pregnant wife. Headlines multiplied before dawn. Damien's face appeared on every news feed, his downfall captured in shaky phone footage as he was shoved into the back of a squad car. But while the world gossiped, Jacqueline sat alone in the nursery, staring at the tiny onesies folded neatly in drawers. The weight of what had happened crushed her chest. She had survived the night, but at what cost? Her marriage was shattered, her trust destroyed, and her baby's future uncertain. The phone buzzed endlessly, messages from friends, from her parents, from coworkers who had seen the news. She ignored them all. She couldn't bear to explain, couldn't bear to relive the slap, the sirens, the humiliation. Instead, she whispered to the child inside her, "It's over now, you're safe." But even as she said it, tears streamed down her cheeks, because she knew safety was only temporary. Damien was powerful, cunning, and vengeful. He wouldn't let this humiliation go unanswered. Somewhere downtown, Damien sat in a holding cell, his mind already plotting revenge. He replayed the night in his head, twisting the story, convincing himself that he was the victim. Rage simmered in his veins, not just at the police, not just at the neighbors who filmed him, but at Jacqueline. In his eyes, she had betrayed him, and he would make her pay. Yet Jacqueline, for the first time in years, had felt a sliver of strength. She had made the call. She had taken the first step. Still, the weight of what was to come threatened to crush her. Court hearings, custody battles, the wrath of a man who believed himself untouchable. Her fight had only just begun. The city outside moved on, the storm clearing to reveal a pale dawn. But inside the penthouse, Jacqueline sat frozen in the rocking chair, clutching the baby blanket she had knitted, whispering promises to her unborn child. She would fight, she would endure, she would rise. Yet, in the quiet corners of her mind, a single terrifying thought lingered. What if Damien came back before the law could stop him? The hours after Damien's arrest blurred into a haze. The sirens faded, the flashing lights outside the window disappeared, and silence returned to the penthouse. But this silence was different. It was heavy, suffocating, the kind that pressed down on Jacqueline's chest until every breath hurt. She sat in the rocking chair in the nursery, her arms wrapped around her swollen belly, rocking slowly as if the motion could soothe her own trembling soul. The walls, painted a soft sky blue, mocked her with their calmness. The tiny crib, the folded onesies, the stuffed bear waiting in the corner, all reminders of the future she had imagined, a future now fractured. Her cheek still throbbed where Damien's hand had struck her. She pressed an ice pack against it, but no cold could numb the sting inside her chest. Tears came without permission, hot and endless, soaking the collar of her nightgown. She wept not only for herself, but for the child inside her, for the innocence already stolen, for the father who had chosen cruelty over love. Her phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand. Messages from her mother, from her closest friend, from colleagues at school. "Are you okay? We saw the news. Please call us." But Jacqueline couldn't bring herself to answer. What could she say? That her perfect husband had become a monster? That the man she had trusted with her life had tried to break her spirit with one violent gesture? She couldn't bear the shame of saying it out loud. She curled deeper into the chair, whispering through her sobs. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you from this." The child shifted inside her, a small kick pressing against her hand. It was as if the tiny life was reminding her, "You're not alone. Not yet. But loneliness gnawed at her anyway. For years she had stood beside Damien at galas, smiling while he shook hands with men in tuxedos. She had watched him climb the ladder of wealth and power, while she remained in the shadows, ignored and belittled. Now, stripped of even the illusion of marriage, she felt like a ghost in her own life. The memories came back in waves. The first time she met him at a charity event, his charming smile, the way he had looked at her as though she were the only woman in the room. She remembered their wedding day, her second-hand dress, and his promise whispered at the altar. "I will protect you, always." The cruel irony twisted like a knife. The same man who had vowed to shield her had become the one she needed protection from. Her sobs grew heavier, her body shaking. She wanted to scream, to smash the chandeliers, to shatter every glass wall that had once seemed like luxury and now felt like prison bars. Instead, she buried her face in her hands, muffling the sound of her grief. At some point, exhaustion overtook her. She drifted into a restless sleep, haunted by nightmares. She dreamed of Damien pounding at the door, of Sabrina's mocking laughter filling the nursery, of her baby crying and crying while she stood helpless. Each time she jolted awake, her heart raced, her palms sweaty, her throat raw from silent screams. By dawn, she felt hollow, like her soul had been drained. She moved mechanically through the penthouse, pulling curtains shut, unplugging the landline to stop the calls. She stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back was unrecognizable, cheeks swollen from crying, hair tangled, eyes red and swollen. "Who are you?" she whispered. Her reflection didn't answer. For a fleeting moment, darkness tempted her. The thought of escape, of disappearing, of running somewhere far away where no one knew her name, flickered in her mind. She imagined packing a single bag, boarding a bus to anywhere, leaving behind the penthouse, the pain, even the memories. But then she felt the baby kick again, and guilt stabbed her. She couldn't run. Not now, not when another life depended on her. She collapsed to her knees in the bathroom, cradling her belly, tears spilling again. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to be strong enough." The memory of her father's voice echoed faintly. "The most important thing to fix is someone's heart." She had thought of Damien when she first heard those words, believing she could fix his ambition, his arrogance, his flaws. But now she realized those words were meant for her. She had to fix her own heart before she could fix anything else. Still, doubt consumed her. The tabloids would have a field day. The investors would turn their backs. Damien would fight for revenge, for custody, for power. Could she really withstand the storm that was coming? She walked to the balcony, pushing open the glass doors. The city sprawled beneath her, alive and indifferent. Cars rushed down avenues, lights blinked in office towers, strangers hurried to work. The world didn't pause for her pain. Her suffering was invisible to the city that glittered at her feet. She gripped the railing, staring down at the streets far below. Fear washed over her. Fear of Damien returning, fear of raising a child alone, fear of becoming nothing more than a tragic headline. She closed her eyes, letting the cold morning air sting her face. Behind her the phone buzzed again, this time a different sound, a voicemail. Curiosity tugged at her, pulling her back inside. She pressed play, and a voice filled the room. It wasn't her mother. It wasn't a friend. It was Damien. From the holding cell, his voice oozed with venom. "You think you've won, Jacqueline? You think calling the cops will save you? You're nothing without me. Nothing. And when I'm out, you'll regret every second of this." Her blood ran cold. The tears stopped, replaced by a shiver that cut deeper than the slap had. He wasn't done. He would never be done. She dropped the phone, clutching her stomach. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, rocking back and forth. For hours she stayed there, trapped between despair and terror, unable to see a way forward. But then, as dusk settled over the city, a knock came at the door. Not the violent pounding of Damien, not the police. It was softer, deliberate. Jacqueline hesitated, her heart racing. She crept toward the door, peering through the peephole. Her breath caught in her throat. Standing on the other side was someone she hadn't expected, someone who could change everything. And in that moment, Jacqueline realized her fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The knock at the door lingered, steady and patient. Jacqueline froze, her hand hovering just above the lock. Her mind raced through possibilities. Had Damien somehow been released already? Was it a reporter, a neighbor, or worse, Sabrina herself? She pressed her eye against the peephole, heart hammering in her chest. It wasn't Damien. On the other side stood Officer Daniel Harris, the man who had responded to her 911 call the night before. He wasn't in uniform now. Instead, he wore a simple gray jacket, his posture relaxed but his eyes serious. Something about his presence carried reassurance, like a steady anchor in a storm. Jacqueline hesitated, then slowly opened the door. "Mrs. Reed," he said softly, his voice gentler than she remembered. "I didn't mean to scare you, I just wanted to check on you, off the record." She blinked, uncertain. "Why? The case is already filed. The police did their job." "Yes," Daniel replied, stepping inside carefully when she motioned him through. "But I saw the look in your husband's eyes last night. He's not just angry, he's dangerous. Men like him, they don't stop because of handcuffs. I couldn't sleep knowing you were here alone." His words cracked the dam. Jacqueline's composure shattered, and she sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice breaking. "He won't stop. He called from jail. He promised he'd ruin me." Daniel sat across from her, his expression steady. "Then we make sure he can't." Jacqueline looked up, tears brimming. "How?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black flash drive. Setting it on the table between them, he leaned forward. "Because Damien Reed has more to hide than an affair, and I think you deserve to know the truth." Jacqueline stared at it, confused. "What is that?" "Evidence," Daniel answered. "Your husband wasn't just caught cheating. He's been under quiet investigation for months. Fraud, tax evasion, offshore accounts. He's been sloppy lately, and last night, one of the cameras in that hotel he sneaks off to captured more than he intended. Not only was he with his mistress, but his violent temper? It's on tape. He shoved her. Hard. It's all here." Jacqueline's eyes widened, her breath catching. "He hurt her too?" Daniel nodded grimly. "It doesn't surprise me. Men who strike once rarely stop at one target. What matters is this. If this footage gets out, Damien's empire crumbles. No investor will touch him. No judge will side with him in custody. For the first time, you have leverage." The room seemed to spin. Jacqueline pressed her hands against her belly, trying to steady herself. She had been bracing for endless battles, convinced Damien's power and money would crush her. But now the ground had shifted. For the first time, he wasn't untouchable. Daniel's voice softened. "I'm not saying this will be easy. He'll fight. He'll deny. But if you're willing to stand, really stand, you can win this. For yourself. For your child." Jacqueline's eyes filled again, but this time not only with tears of sorrow, tears of something fiercer, something that felt dangerously close to hope. Still, doubt clawed at her. "Even if this destroys him, what about me? The media will tear me apart. They'll say I set him up. They'll call me a liar." Daniel shook his head firmly. "You won't face it alone. You'll have me. And you'll have the truth." That's stronger than his lies. The flash drive sat on the table, small but powerful, like a key to freedom. Jacqueline stared at it for a long time before reaching out and taking it into her trembling hand. It felt heavier than it should have, as if the weight of her entire future had been pressed into its metal frame. That night, long after Daniel left, Jacqueline plugged the flash drive into her laptop. The screen lit up, and there it was, grainy but unmistakable footage. Damien, drunk, storming through a luxury hotel suite. Sabrina was there, her laughter sharp, her dress glittering under dim lights. The scene escalated fast. Damien shouted, shoved her onto the bed, threw a glass against the wall. Sabrina's smile faltered, her fear captured for the world to see. Jacqueline covered her mouth, nausea rising. It wasn't just betrayal, it was violence. A pattern. Proof that her suffering hadn't been an isolated incident, but part of who Damien truly was. And then came the twist she hadn't expected. In the corner of the video, Sabrina's phone lit up, an incoming message displayed on the screen. The name made Jacqueline's blood run cold. It wasn't Damien she was loyal to, it was another man, an investor Damien had considered his closest ally. Sabrina had been playing both sides. Jacqueline's mind spun. Sabrina wasn't just a mistress, she was leverage, she was evidence, and Damien in his arrogance hadn't seen it coming. For hours Jacqueline sat staring at the footage, her emotions a storm of rage, grief, and something else. Resolve. She thought of her baby, of the life she wanted to build. She thought of the girl she had once been, the one who believed love could fix everything. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who had seen the truth and could no longer look away. By morning, her tears had dried. She moved with purpose, packing away the remnants of her old life. She folded her maternity clothes neatly, placed her wedding ring into a small box, and set it on the nightstand. She was done living in the shadow of Damian Reed. The city outside sparkled with sunrise, golden light spilling through the glass walls. Jacqueline stood tall, the flash drive clenched in her fist. For the first time, she wasn't just reacting to Damian's cruelty. She was ready to fight back. And as the baby stirred inside her, she whispered, "We're not victims anymore, we're survivors." She glanced once more at the footage on the screen. Damian's rage frozen mid-motion, Sabrina's mask slipping in fear. The sight no longer broke her. It fueled her. Because now Jacqueline held the one thing Damian feared most: power. And soon, the woman he had tried to silence would return, not broken, but transformed. The morning after she watched the footage, Jacqueline stood in front of her mirror and barely recognized herself. Her cheeks were pale, her eyes swollen, her body curved around the precious child she carried. For weeks, she had seen nothing but weakness in that reflection. A woman beaten down, a woman trapped. But something had shifted. In her hand, she held the flash drive, small yet blazing with possibility. It wasn't just evidence, it was freedom. For the first time, she felt like the chains Damian had wrapped around her were loosening. She touched the mark on her cheek where his hand had landed, still faintly visible. The pain was real, but it no longer defined her. Instead, it fueled her resolve. "Never again," she whispered to her reflection. "Never again will I let him take my voice." The first step was appearance. She showered, letting the hot water wash away the remnants of tears, the stink of fear. She brushed her hair until it shone again, applied a soft touch of makeup, and slipped into a maternity dress that accentuated her growing belly instead of hiding it. She no longer wanted to appear fragile. She wanted to appear unbreakable. When she emerged from the bathroom, she looked almost like a different woman, still gentle, still tender, but with steel glinting beneath the surface. The kind of woman Damian would never expect, the kind of woman who could stand in a courtroom and not flinch. Her next step was action. She contacted an attorney, a woman recommended by Officer Daniel. Her name was Claire Monroe, a sharp, battle-tested divorce lawyer known for dismantling men like Damian with surgical precision. They met that afternoon in Claire's office, a high-rise filled with walls of legal books and framed certificates. Claire listened quietly as Jacqueline poured out her story, her voice trembling at first but growing steadier with each detail. When she finished, Claire leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen against her chin. "Mrs. Reed," Claire said firmly, "your husband may think he's untouchable, but he's not. We have evidence of abuse, infidelity, financial misconduct. With this," she tapped the flash drive, "we not only secure your freedom, we secure your child's future. But you need to be ready. Men like Damian don't go down quietly." Jacqueline's jaw tightened. "I'm ready. For my child, I'll fight as long as it takes." Claire's eyes softened with respect. "Then let's start building your case. By the time we're done, he won't recognize the woman he tried to break." Days turned into weeks, and Jacqueline threw herself into preparation. She attended meetings with Claire, gathering documents, recounting every bruise of memory Damian had left behind. It was painful, like ripping open old wounds, but each piece of evidence made her stronger. Daniel checked in often, sometimes escorting her to appointments for extra protection. His quiet presence was steadying, a reminder that not all men used strength to harm. When Jacqueline faltered, he reminded her of her courage that night she called 911. "You already proved you're stronger than him," he said once. "Now it's time to prove it to the world." But transformation wasn't just legal, it was personal. Jacqueline began taking walks in Central Park, hand on her belly, breathing in fresh air as if reclaiming space she had denied herself for too long. She met with a therapist recommended by Claire, a gentle older woman who reminded Jacqueline of her mother. In that safe office, she spoke her truth aloud for the first time without shame. Every session peeled away another layer of fear, replacing it with clarity. Slowly, her confidence grew. She no longer answered Damian's venomous voicemails, no longer flinched at shadows. She learned to silence the voice in her head that called her weak and began to embrace the one that called her survivor. Her wardrobe changed too. Gone were the soft, muted dresses Damien preferred. She began wearing bold colors, deep reds, sapphire blues, clothes that made her feel alive, radiant, unapologetic. She cut her hair shorter, sharper, a symbol of severing ties with the woman she once was. When she looked in the mirror now, she saw not a victim, but a warrior. The press followed every development of Damien's downfall, and though she hated the attention, Jacqueline learned to use it. With Claire's guidance, she gave a controlled statement to a journalist known for exposing abusive men of power. Her words were simple but powerful. "I will no longer be silent. I will protect my child, and I will seek justice." The headline exploded across media outlets. For once, Damien wasn't the story of a self-made investor. He was the story of a man accused of striking his pregnant wife. And Jacqueline, no longer hidden, was the face of strength. Each day she grew more determined. She began practicing her testimony in front of a mirror, her voice steady, her eyes unwavering. She imagined Damien sitting across from her in court, his smirk fading as she told the truth he could no longer silence. The thought no longer terrified her. It energized her. Still, fear lingered at the edges. There were nights when she woke in sweat, dreams of Damien pounding at her door haunting her. But even then she would rise, walk into the nursery, and rest her hand on the crib. "We're safe," she whispered to the baby. "We're stronger every day." By the time the court date loomed near, Jacqueline had become someone new. Her transformation wasn't loud or dramatic. It was steady, deliberate, unstoppable. She carried herself differently, her steps firm, her gaze unyielding. The world that once pitied her now looked at her with admiration. The woman who had once sat in silence, rocking in despair, was gone. In her place stood a mother ready to fight, a woman ready to reclaim her life. And yet, deep in her heart, Jacqueline knew the battle wasn't finished. Court was one thing, but Damien wasn't the kind of man to surrender. He would strike back, and when he did, she needed to be ready. That night, as she laid out her documents and prepared her testimony, her phone buzzed with a new message. No number displayed, just a single line of text. "See you in court, Jacqueline. You won't win." Her hands shook as she read it, but she didn't delete it. Instead, she saved it, another piece of evidence for Claire, another weapon in her growing arsenal. She straightened her shoulders, staring into the city lights beyond the penthouse windows. Because if Damien wanted war, she was ready, and the world was about to witness her fight. The day of the hearing arrived like a storm. Jacqueline had been bracing for her entire life. The courthouse loomed over the city street, its marble steps worn by decades of battles fought within its walls. Crowds had gathered outside, reporters with flashing cameras, curious onlookers, even protesters carrying signs that read, "Justice for Jacqueline." Jacqueline stepped out of the car, Claire Monroe at her side, Officer Daniel following discreetly behind. She wore a deep navy dress that hugged her pregnant frame gracefully, her short hair styled neatly, her chin lifted with quiet strength. The whispers rippled through the crowd. "That's her, Damien's wife. She looks so strong. She's not hiding anymore." Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Damien sat at the defendant's table, his suit immaculate, his smirk rehearsed. But there was a tightness in his jaw, a flicker of rage behind his eyes. Beside him, his high-priced lawyer shuffled papers, whispering in frantic tones. Sabrina was there too, seated in the back, her presence impossible to ignore. Her once defiant smirk looked thinner now, her gaze darting nervously as reporters pointed cameras her way. When Jacqueline entered, all eyes turned. She didn't shrink under their gaze. She walked with steady steps to her seat, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Claire whispered encouragement, but Jacqueline didn't need it. She felt the strength radiating from somewhere deeper. Her child, her parents' memory, her own resilience. The judge, a stern woman with years etched into her face, called the room to order. The case of Jacqueline Reed versus Damien Reed began. Damien's lawyer started with bravado. "Your Honor, my client is a respected businessman, a pillar of this city. These accusations are nothing more than exaggerations by a hormonal wife seeking leverage in a divorce." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Claire rose instantly. "Objection. We have evidence that contradicts every word of that statement." The judge nodded. "Proceed, Miss Monroe." Claire clicked a remote, and the screen at the front of the courtroom flickered to life. The footage from the hotel appeared, grainy but undeniable. Damien, red-faced and drunk, shouting, shoving Sabrina onto the bed. Gasps echoed again. Cameras clicked furiously as reporters scribbled notes. Damien leapt to his feet. "This is taken out of context," he shouted, his face reddening. "I was drunk. I didn't mean." "Sit down, Mr. Reed," the judge ordered sharply. Claire pressed on, her voice sharp as steel. "This is not an isolated incident, Your Honor. This is a pattern of violence. We have 911 call transcripts, medical records documenting bruises, witness testimonies from neighbors. Mr. Reed did not just betray his vows, he endangered his wife and unborn child." Jacqueline's hands trembled slightly as she prepared to speak. When the judge asked if she wanted to testify, she rose slowly, every step toward the stand echoing like thunder. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and turned to face the courtroom. Her voice was soft at first, but grew steadier with each word. "I loved my husband. I believed in him. But love cannot excuse violence. The night he struck me, I called 911 because I knew, if I didn't, I might not survive. I'm not here to ruin his reputation. I'm here to protect my child, and I won't let Damien silence me ever again." Her words cut through the courtroom like lightning. Even Sabrina shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes darting away. Then came the final blow. Claire produced the text message Damien had sent from jail, the one where he threatened Jacqueline. Projected on the screen, the words glowed like poison. "You're nothing without me. When I'm out, you'll regret this." The room erupted in murmurs. Damien's lawyer scrambled for excuses, but the damage was done. Damien himself looked shaken for the first time, his smirk collapsing into a grimace. And then Sabrina stood up. All eyes turned as she walked hesitantly toward the witness stand. I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice trembling. "Damien promised me the world, but he lied. He hurt me too. He used me, and he's been hiding money overseas. I saw the accounts myself." Gasps rippled again, louder than before. Damien shot to his feet, his face twisted in rage. "You lying little—" "Enough, Mr. Reed," the judge barked, slamming her gavel. "Sit down, or you'll be held in contempt." For the first time, Jacqueline saw fear flicker in Damien's eyes. His empire was crumbling in real time, his mistress turning against him, his secrets exposed, his wife unbroken before the world. When Jacqueline stepped down from the stand, reporters leaned forward, eager to capture her expression. She didn't cry. She didn't falter. She walked back to her seat with her head held high, Claire's reassuring hand brushing her shoulder. The judge adjourned for deliberation, but the outcome was already clear. Damien's empire of lies had collapsed under the weight of truth. Outside, the courthouse steps were flooded with cameras and flashing lights. Reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust toward Jacqueline. She paused, her hand resting on her belly, her voice calm but resolute. "I'm not a victim," she said. "I'm a mother. I'm a survivor. And no woman should ever have to choose between silence and survival." The crowd erupted in cheers, some even moved to tears. For the first time in a long time, Jacqueline felt not fear, but power. The kind of power born not of wealth or manipulation, but of truth and courage. Yet even as the crowd cheered, her eyes caught Damien's across the courthouse entrance. He was being escorted out by officers, his face pale with fury. His lips moved, forming silent words only she could understand. "This isn't over." Jacqueline's spine stiffened. She knew he meant it, but she also knew something he didn't. The next chapter of her life was already written, and it no longer had his name on it. The gavel struck once, sharp and final, echoing through the courtroom like thunder. Judge Alvarez's voice was steady, each word deliberate. "In the matter of Reed versus Reed, the court grants full custody of the unborn child to Mrs. Jacqueline Reed. A restraining order against Mr. Damien Reed is hereby issued, effective immediately. Additionally, financial restitution will be required for spousal support and child support. This court finds Mr. Reed's conduct reprehensible and his credibility compromised." The sound of victory wasn't loud. It wasn't cheering or applause. It was silence, heavy, undeniable, irreversible. Damien slumped in his chair, his face a mask of disbelief. His lawyer's shoulders sagged in defeat. The empire Damien thought indestructible had collapsed, not with a roar, but with the quiet weight of justice. Jacqueline sat perfectly still, her hand resting over her belly. She felt the baby stir as though even within her womb, the child knew they were safe now. Tears burned her eyes, but this time they weren't born of despair. They were tears of release, of relief, of triumph. Claire Monroe leaned closer, whispering, "You did it. You protected yourself, and you protected your child." Jacqueline nodded, her voice too thick with emotion to reply. She rose slowly, every step steady as she left the courtroom. Behind her, Damien exploded into fury, shouting accusations, blaming the system, cursing Jacqueline's name. But his voice was drowned beneath the gavel's final echo and the rustle of reporters rushing toward Jacqueline. Outside, the courthouse steps were packed. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward, reporters shouting questions over one another. Jacqueline paused, Daniel at her side like a silent guardian, Claire nearby, her face proud. Jacqueline raised a hand, not to silence the crowd, but to steady herself. Her voice, when it came, was clear, firm, and carried across the steps like a beacon. "I once believed silence kept the peace. I thought if I endured enough, if I loved enough, if I forgave enough, things would change. But silence doesn't protect you. It only protects the one who hurts you. Today, I chose not to be silent, and because of that, my child and I are safe. To every woman watching, your voice matters, your life matters, and you are stronger than you know." For a moment, the world seemed to pause. Then the crowd erupted, not in scandalous whispers, but in applause. Some clapped, some cried, some shouted encouragement. Jacqueline felt the warmth of their support wrap around her, stronger than the chill of the autumn air. In the days that followed, the headlines shifted. No longer was Jacqueline Reed just the pregnant wife of disgraced investor. She was called the woman who fought back. Editorials praised her courage. Advocacy groups reached out, offering her platforms to speak. Donations poured into domestic violence charities in her name. Damien, meanwhile, fell from grace. His investors pulled out, his companies filed for bankruptcy, his name dragged through the mud in every financial paper. Sabrina disappeared from the spotlight, her betrayal of him becoming part of the scandal's infamy. For a man who once fed on power and admiration, being ignored was the cruelest punishment. Jacqueline didn't revel in his downfall. She didn't need revenge anymore. Justice had been enough. What mattered was building a life free of his shadow. She moved out of the penthouse, leaving behind the glass and marble cage that had never been a home. Instead, she rented a modest townhouse in a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and the laughter of children echoing in the afternoons. She decorated the nursery again, this time with joy instead of fear, painting the walls a soft yellow, filling it with books, toys, and love. Daniel visited often, bringing groceries or just company. He never pushed, never demanded, simply offered his steady presence. Over time, Jacqueline found herself smiling more easily when he was around. Trust didn't come quickly, but it came naturally. The night her baby was born, rain fell against the hospital windows, just like the night everything had changed. But this storm felt different. It felt cleansing, healing, like the world was washing away the remnants of the past. When the nurse placed the tiny infant in her arms, Jacqueline wept openly, whispering, "You're safe, you're loved, we're free." She named her daughter Hope. Weeks later, Jacqueline stood on a stage at a charity gala, not as someone's accessory, not as the silent wife of a powerful man, but as the keynote speaker. She wore a flowing emerald gown, her daughter asleep in a stroller nearby, her voice steady as she addressed the audience. "I was once told that the most important thing to fix is someone's heart. I tried to fix a man who could not be fixed, and it nearly destroyed me. But then I realized the heart I needed to mend was my own, and when I did, I found strength I didn't know I had. Tonight, I stand before you not as a victim, but as a survivor, and I promise you, no woman, no child, no family should ever have to suffer in silence again." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Jacqueline's eyes scanned the crowd, not for Damien, not for ghosts of the past, but for the faces of women who now looked at her with hope, just as she had once longed for someone to look at her. Her journey hadn't been easy. It had been marked with betrayal, violence, and despair. But in the end, she had found not just justice, but purpose. She had found her voice. And as she walked off the stage, cradling her daughter in her arms, Jacqueline knew one truth with absolute certainty. Her story was no longer about survival. It was about victory. So that's how our story comes to an end, my dear friends. You're still here with me, right? If you've stayed until this very moment, it means something in Jacqueline's journey has touched your heart too. And maybe, just maybe, you see a piece of yourself or someone you love in her struggle and her victory. Life is never free of pain or betrayal. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, we cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. Jacqueline could not control Damien's cruelty, but she chose to rise, to fight back, and to protect her child. That choice turned her from a victim into a survivor. And that lesson belongs to all of us. If you are hurting, if you are carrying scars no one else can see, remember, you are stronger than you think. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Healing begins the moment you refuse to stay silent, the moment you take back control of your story. So my friends, let this not just be a story you watched, but a reminder you carry forward in your own life. If this journey moved you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so together we can keep telling stories that heal, inspire, and remind us we are never truly alone.